"She's not complying! Taser! Taser! Taser!" The shout sliced through the chaotic suburban morning, instantly followed by the sharp crackle of electricity and Sarah's agonized scream. Mark Tanner, 67, forced to his knees by a SWAT officer, watched. In horror as his wife convulsed on their own front lawn, their 2 young grandchildren, wide-eyed with terror, clung to his legs. He didn't yell, didn't struggle. He just looked up at the SWAT commander, his eyes like chips of ice, and whispered, "6 words, get General Peterson on the line." Now, the entire heavily armed team froze mid-motion. If you believe some words carry more weight than any weapon, type "unbreakable" below. Mark Tanner had cultivated a life of quiet anonymity in the sleepy cul-de-sac of Willow Creek Drive. He was the friendly retiree who mowed his lawn with meticulous precision, always had a wave for the neighbors, and patiently taught his grandkids, 8-year-old Lily and 6-year-old Tom, how to identify birds in their backyard. His past, a 30-year career in a highly specialized, rarely spoken of branch of Army Special Operations, was buried deep. A locked box of memories he preferred not to open. He'd seen enough conflict, enough violence, to last several lifetimes. Now he craved peace, the simple rhythm of family life with his beloved wife Sarah, a retired school teacher whose warmth was the anchor of their home. Their days were filled with school runs for the grandkids, whom they were caring for while their daughter, an active-duty Army doctor, was deployed, gardening and quiet evenings. He was just Grandpa Mark, the gentle storyteller, the patient fixer of broken toys. No one in Willow Creek knew about the medals in his attic, the commendations signed by presidents, or the missions that had shaped nations but would never appear. In history books, that carefully constructed piece shattered on a bright Tuesday morning. The first indication was the screech of tires, too aggressive for their quiet street. Mark was in the kitchen, making pancakes with Lily and Tom. Sarah was in the front garden, tending her prize-winning roses. He glanced out the window, expecting perhaps a reckless delivery driver. Instead, he saw a black, unmarked tactical van skid to a halt in front of their house, immediately followed by 3 more. Doors flew open, and heavily armed men in full SWAT gear, faces obscured by helmets and balaclavas, poured out, weapons raised, fanning across his lawn with terrifying efficiency. Police! Search warrant! Everyone on the ground! Hands visible! The shouts were amplified, distorted by bullhorns. Mark's blood ran cold, years of ingrained training kicking in even as his mind reeled in confusion. He grabbed Lily and Tom, pulling them close. "Stay with Grandpa." "Don't be scared," he said, his voice remarkably calm despite the adrenaline surging through him. Sarah, startled by the commotion, straightened up from her rose bushes, shears still in hand, her face a mask of bewildered fear. "What on earth—" she began. "Ma'am, drop the weapon. Get on the ground." A SWAT officer bellowed at her, mistaking the gleaming shears for something sinister. Sarah, confused and terrified, froze. It's just for my roses." "She's not complying," another officer yelled. Mark, seeing the situation escalate with horrifying speed, tried to intervene. "She's my wife. Those are garden shears. Kids are present." He started to move toward the front door, Lily and Tom clinging to him. An officer immediately intercepted him, forcing him roughly to his knees on the porch. "Stay down." "Hands where I can see them," Mark complied, shielding his grandchildren as best he could, his mind racing. This had to be a mistake, a wrong address, a terrible, catastrophic error. From his position on the porch, forced to his knees with his terrified grandchildren clutching his legs, Mark watched the nightmare unfold on his own front lawn. Sarah, still frozen with fear and confusion, her garden shears held loosely at her side, was surrounded by 3 heavily armed officers. "Ma'am, final warning, drop it and get down," one of them screamed, his voice cracking with adrenaline. Sarah, her hands trembling, began to lower the shears, but her movements were slow, uncertain. Perhaps she didn't fully comprehend the commands through her fear. Perhaps she was simply too terrified to react quickly enough. "She's still not complying." An officer near the front of the group yelled, Taser! 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 Mark saw the yellow prongs arc through the air. He saw the electricity jolt through Sarah's body. He heard her scream, a raw, agonizing sound that ripped through him, a sound his grandchildren would likely never forget. Sarah convulsed violently, then collapsed onto the manicured grass amidst her beloved roses, the shears clattering beside her. Lily and Tom started screaming, their small bodies shaking uncontrollably against Mark. Mark didn't scream. He didn't rage. Years of discipline, of operating under extreme duress, took over. A cold, preternatural calm settled over him, masking the inferno of fury and fear within. He looked up, his gaze finding the SWAT team leader, identifiable by the slight difference in his helmet insignia and his position directing the others. The commander was watching Sarah's prone form, perhaps a flicker of unease now in his stance. Mark held the commander's gaze. His voice, when he spoke, was not loud, but it cut through the residual chaos with chilling precision. A whisper that carried the weight of thunder. He spoke 6 words, each one delivered with icy deliberation. A lifetime of authority packed into their syllables. Get General Peterson on the line, now. The SWAT commander, a seasoned officer named Captain Miller, visibly started. He'd expected shouts, pleas, threats from the man on the porch. He hadn't expected this quiet, absolute command, the specific mention of a 4-star. General, delivered with an unnerving certainty that brooked no argument. The other SWAT officers, who had been moving to secure Sarah or further restrain Mark, froze mid-motion, their actions arrested by the sheer unexpected authority in those whispered words. General Peterson, General James Iron Jim Peterson, current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, a legendary figure known for his fierce temper and unwavering loyalty to his people, was not a name to be invoked lightly. "What did you say?" Captain Miller asked, taking a hesitant step toward Mark, a sudden uncertainty replacing his earlier aggressive posture. "You heard me, Captain," Mark replied, his eyes still locked on Miller's. "General James Peterson, tell him Mark Tanner. Call. Sign Wraith is requesting his immediate personal intervention. Code Sierra Alpha. November Delta. You have 60 seconds before I escalate this through other channels. Wraith. Sierra Alpha November Delta." These were not terms a civilian, even one with some military knowledge, would use. They were call signs, emergency protocols from a world Captain Miller knew existed but had never personally brushed against. A world of black operations and deniable assets. A world where a whisper could indeed carry more weight than a full tactical team. Miller's radio operator, standing nearby, was already paling, his eyes wide. He'd recognized the protocol sequence. "Sir," the radio operator began, his voice trembling slightly. That's a legitimate Tier 1 authentication. Mandatory immediate relay to Stratcom, direct to Chairman's office." Captain Miller stared at Mark, then at his own men, who were now looking at him with a mixture of confusion and dawning apprehension. The screams of the children, the sight of the woman still twitching slightly on the grass, the icy command from the man on his knees, it all coalesced into a sudden, terrible realization. They had made a catastrophic mistake, a mistake that could have career-ending, if not nation-shaking repercussions. "Medic for the woman, now!" Miller barked, his voice suddenly hoarse. He fumbled for his own radio. "Command, this is Miller. Hold all action. We have a potential situation here. I need a direct secure line to General Peterson's office. Priority 1. Authentication code. Wraith, Sierra Alpha, November Delta. Yes, you heard me right. Now." The next few minutes were a blur of controlled chaos and dawning horror for Captain Miller's SWAT team. Medics rushed to Sarah, their movements urgent. Other officers began to cautiously lower their weapons, casting uneasy glances between Mark, still kneeling, his terrified grandchildren now sobbing into his shoulders, their commander, and the suddenly silent, menacing sky. Captain Miller, his face ashen, was patched through on a secure channel. The conversation was brief, brutally one-sided. Miller could be heard saying, "Yes, General. No, General. I understand, General. Unacceptable. Yes, General. My profound apologies, General." He's secure, on his knees with his grandchildren. "His wife was tased, sir." "Yes, General." "I know." "Wrong house, sir." "Oh, God." Miller's hand, holding the radio, visibly shook. He ended the call, looking like a man who had just stared into the abyss. "Stand down," he croaked to his team. "All units, stand down. We hit the wrong house. Repeat, wrong house. The target was 3 blocks over, different street name entirely." A wave of sick realization washed over the team. They had terrorized an innocent family, tased an innocent woman, all due to a catastrophic intelligence failure in their briefing. And the man they had forced to his knees, the grandfather whose wife they had just electrocuted, was apparently someone who could get the chairman of the Joint Chiefs on the phone. With 6 whispered words, the air filled with the sounds of frantic radio traffic, damage control kicking into high gear. Higher-ups were en route. Internal Affairs was being notified. The mayor's office was likely in meltdown. Mark Tanner watched, it all with that same unnerving, icy calm. He allowed the medics to help him guide Sarah, now groggy and disoriented, but conscious, into the house, away from the terrified eyes of Lily and Tom. He settled them all in the living room, speaking softly to his grandkids, assuring them Grandpa was there. It was a mistake. They were safe now, but his eyes, when they occasionally flicked toward the SWAT officers now milling about his lawn like chastened schoolboys, held a promise of accountability that was far more chilling than any shouted threat. Within the hour, Willow Creek Drive looked less like a suburban street and more like a high-level incident command center. Unmarked black sedans with government plates began arriving, disgorging stern-faced men and women in dark suits who spoke in hushed, urgent tones. The local police chief arrived, looking pale and stressed. A liaison officer from General Peterson's staff, a full colonel, was already on site, his demeanor icy as he took statements and surveyed the scene. Captain Miller and his entire SWAT team were officially stood down, confined to their vehicles, pending a full investigation. The story of the Willow Creek raid and the 6-word takedown would become a cautionary legend in law enforcement circles for years to come. A stark reminder of the catastrophic consequences of poor intelligence, excessive force, and underestimating the quiet man next door. General Peterson himself didn't arrive. His personal presence wasn't needed once the initial command structure understood the magnitude of their error, but his influence was everywhere. Ensuring that Sarah received the best possible medical attention, she would recover, though emotionally scarred, that the family was protected from media intrusion, and that the investigation into the botched raid was swift, thorough, and brutally impartial. Mark Tanner never raised his voice, never filed a lawsuit. He didn't need to. His 6 whispered words had set in motion a chain of events that ensured accountability would be absolute. He focused on his family, on comforting Sarah, on reassuring Lily and Tom that the scary men were gone and wouldn't be back. But the peace of Willow Creek Drive had been shattered. The incident forced a reckoning. Within the local police department and beyond, leading to revised raid protocols, enhanced intelligence verification, and mandatory de-escalation training. Mark Tanner, the quiet retiree, the loving grandfather, had inadvertently become a catalyst for change simply by knowing who to call and by possessing a past that, when invoked, could freeze even the most heavily armed men in their tracks. Because some veterans carry more than just memories. They carry an authority forged in crucibles few can imagine, an authority that, even in a whisper, demands to be heard, and sometimes those 6 quiet words are all it takes to remind the world that true power doesn't always come from the barrel of a gun. Subscribe to Hidden Sparks if you believe in the quiet strength of our veterans, and that accountability should always follow injustice.